Section 49 of The Toilers of the Sea by Victor Hugo. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain, read by John Greenman. Chapter 2 Much Astonishment on the Western Coast. The following night the moon rose at 10 o'clock. Nevertheless, however good the appearance of the night, the wind, and the sea, no fisherman dreamed of setting out either from Auge-la-Pierre or Bordeaux, or from Umeg-Benet, or from Le Platon, or from Port-Gras, or from Vasson Bay, or from Perelle Bay, or from Pézerie, or from Le Thiel, or from the Bay of Les Saints, or from Petit Bot, or from any port or small harbor of Guernsey. And this was quite simple. The cocks had crowed at midday. When the cock crows at an unusual hour, the catch of fish fails. Nevertheless, that evening at nightfall, a fisherman who was returning to Omptol had a surprise. Off Houmet Paradis, beyond the two Bray and the two Grunes, with the beacon of the Plate Fouchière, in the form of a reversed funnel, on the right, and the beacon of Saint Sampson, which represents the figure of a man, on the left, he thought he perceived a third beacon. What beacon was this? When had it been placed on that point? What shoals did it indicate? The beacon immediately answered these questions. It moved. It was a mast. The fisherman's astonishment did not diminish. A beacon suggested a question. A mast was much more suggestive. No fishing was possible. Someone was going out when everybody else was coming in. Who? Why? 10 minutes later the mast, advancing slowly, came within a short distance of the fisherman of Omptol. He could not recognize the vessel. He heard the sound of rowing. There was the noise of 2 oars. Hence it was probably a man alone. The man was from the north. This man was evidently rowing to catch the wind beyond Point Fontenelle. There he would probably hoist his sail. Hence he intended to double Ancres and Montrevel. What was the meaning of this? The mast passed by. The fisherman ran into harbor. That same night chance observers on the west coast of Guernsey, scattered and isolated, made remarks at different hours and at various points. Just as the Omptelle fisherman had finished mooring his boat, a carter of seaweed, half a mile farther on, as he whipped up his horses in the deserted road of Cloture, near the Cromwell, in the vicinity of Martello Towers 6 and 7, saw a sail being hoisted on the water far away on the horizon, in a spot which was little frequented, because it was necessary to know it well, towards La Roque Nord and La Sablonneuse. He paid but little attention to it, however, being intent on his cart and not on boats. Half an hour, perhaps, had elapsed after the carter perceived this sail, when a plasterer, returning from his work in the town and passing round the Pelée pool, suddenly found himself almost opposite a boat very audaciously making its way among the rocks of the Quenon, the Rouge de Mer, and the Grippe de Rousse. The night was black, but the sea was light, an effect which is frequently produced, and one can then distinguish vessels going and coming on the water. There was no other boat on the sea except this one. A little lower down and a little later, a lobsterman arranging his pots on the sand which separates Port Soif, Port Thirst, from Port Enfer, Port Hell, could not understand the maneuvers of a boat gliding between the Bout Corneille and the Moulgrette. A man must be a good pilot, and in great haste to reach his destination, to risk himself there. As 8 o'clock was sounding at the Catel, the innkeeper of Cobo Bay observed with some bewilderment a sail beyond the Bout du Jardin and the Grunette, very near La Suzanne and the Grune de l'Ouest. Not far from Cobo Bay, on the solitary point of Houmet on the Vasson Bay, 2 lovers were parting and holding each other back. At the moment when the girl was saying to the youth, "If I go away, 'tis not because I do not like to be with you, but because I have my chores to attend to." Their attention was diverted from their parting kiss by a rather large boat which passed by very near them and directed its course towards the Messelette. M. le Père de Norgioux, who lived at Cotillon-Pipet, was busy about 9 o'clock in the evening in examining a hole made by marauders in the hedge of his garden, La Génorette, and in his double ladder planted with trees. As he observed the damage he could not help noticing a boat rashly doubling Croque Point at that hour of the night. This was a very hazardous course on the day after a tempest, and with the agitation still remaining in the sea, one was imprudent to select it unless one knew the channels by heart. At 9:30 at Le Quartier, a trawler bringing in his net halted for some time to watch something which must be a boat between Colombelle and La Souffleresse. This boat was exposing itself greatly. There are sudden and very dangerous gusts of wind there. The Souffleresse, or blower rock, is so named because it blows unexpectedly on vessels. At the moment when the moon rose the tide was full, and the sea being spread out in the little strait of Lihou, the solitary keeper of the island of Lihou was greatly startled. He saw a long black object pass between him and the moon. That lofty black narrow form resembled a winding sheet, erect and walking. It glided slowly along the top of the sort of wall formed by the piles of rocks. The guardian of Lihou thought he recognized the Black Lady. The White Lady inhabits the Taux de Pays d'Amont, the Gray Lady inhabits the Taux de Pays d'Aval, the Red Lady inhabits the Silleuse, to the north of the Ban Marquis, and the Black Lady inhabits the Grand Etacré, to the west of L'Île Humet. At night, by moonlight, these ladies come out, and sometimes meet. This black form might possibly be a sail. The long bars of rocks over which it seemed to be walking might, in reality, conceal the hull of a boat sailing behind them and allow the sail only to be seen. But the guardian asked himself what boat would dare to risk itself at that hour between Lihou and La Pécheresse and the Angluyère and Léré Point, and with what object? It appeared more probable to him that it was the Black Lady. Just as the moon had passed the bell tower of Saint Pierre du Bois, the guard of the Chateau Roquin, as he raised the half of the drawbridge, distinguished at the mouth of the bay, further on than La Haute Carré, nearer than La Sambule, a sailing vessel which seemed to be going from north to south. On this southern coast of Guernsey there exists, behind Pleinmont, at the bottom of a bay, all composed of precipices and rocks rising perpendicularly from the waves, a singular port, which a Frenchman, who had sojourned in the island ever since 1855, the same possibly as he who writes these lines, had baptized as the Port on the Fourth Story, a name generally adopted at the present day. This port, which was then called the Moi, is a rock plateau, half natural, half hewn out, elevated about 40 feet above the level of the water, and communicating with the waves by two great parallel beams on an inclined plane. Boats, hoisted by sheer strength of arm, by chains and pulleys, mount from the sea and descend again along these beams, which are like two rails. There is a staircase for men. This port was greatly frequented at that time by smugglers. Not being very practicable, it was convenient for them. Towards 11 o'clock some smugglers, perhaps the very ones on whom Clubin had reckoned, were standing with their bales on the summit of this platform of La Moi. He who smuggles is on the lookout. They were on the alert. They were astonished by a sail which suddenly appeared beyond the black silhouette of Cape Pleinmont. The moon was shining. These smugglers watched that sail, fearing that it was some coastguard boat on its way to station itself in ambush behind the great Hanway. But the sail passed the Hanways, left the Bout Blondel behind it on the northwest, and then disappeared in the open sea, amid the pale shadows of the mists on the horizon. "Where the devil can that boat be going?" said the smugglers to each other. That same evening, a little after sunset, some one was heard to knock at the door of the Bû de la Rue. It was a young man dressed in brown, with yellow stockings, which indicated a junior clerk of the parish. The Bû de la Rue was closed, door and shutters. An old woman, a fisher of the fruits of the sea, who was prowling about the bank with a lantern, hailed the youth, and these words were exchanged by the fishwife and the junior clerk in front of the Bû de la Rue. "What do you want, young man?" "The man who lives here." "He's not here." "Where is he?" "I don't know." "Will he be here tomorrow?" "I don't know." "Has he gone away?" "I don't know." "You see, my good woman, the new rector of the parish, the Reverend Ebenezer Caudray, would like to call on him." "I don't know." "The reverend gentleman has sent me to inquire whether the man of the Bû de la Rue will be at home tomorrow." "I don't know." Chapter 3. Much Astonishment on the Western Coast.